Well, good afternoon. This is Scott Thompson here with the Willow Creek Studio and Scott Art CNC on Etsy. So I'm a file maker and a wood carver and run a little gallery in Alaska. And today I'm going to try to teach you. I like to carve wood and paint it at the same time. And I know here in Alaska we don't have a lot of really nice wood. Mostly I carve in pine. So I'm kind of jealous when I watch all you guys carving and beautiful maple and walnut and all that, but we just don't have the nice wood. So I ended up instead of having beautiful finishes on what I work on painting them. So I'm going to share some of the stuff I do when I paint, and we're going to paint a little largemouth bass, maybe some bluegills if we have time. And you'll find below I'm going to paste information on what paints I use and and a little bit of information on the actual model, the CNC model that I use to carve this, if you want to try to follow along. So the idea of this painting is that if if you go pick up the model at my Etsy store, you can buy the model, carve it, and then pause this video as you go and kind of follow along as you go. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I mix paint and the colors and mistakes I make and then do-overs. So stand by, watch, and I'll show you what we're going to do. So let me see if I can get the camera turned around here a bit. The first thing you'll see is I have some references up here there's the bluegills. There's one of the bass references I use. That's one I did a while ago. Turn that off. See if I can do that. But there's the bass picture reference that we're going to use today. And if you go to the Etsy store, that file will be included in the file for the machining. So there's the bass, and I kind of started on them already. Basically, I blocked in the bass in white. We're going to do most of that painting today. I started working on the bluegills the other day and the log in the background a little bit. But so we'll come back and work on those at the end if we have time. But for right now, what I want to do is walk you through the process with the bass. So the first thing I do is I coat it in titanium white, just basically white acrylic paint. Now, everything I do is in acrylic paints. They dry this room is at about 64 degrees right now, 64 degrees, and it'll take 10 to 15 minutes to dry. At 70 degrees, they'll dry in 6 or 7 minutes. So the nice thing about that is you can dry them out and paint over them. I also have a little hair dryer here with me that I'll use to dry paint during the process as we go along. So the first thing I'm going to do, based on the reference that I see here, is there is some yellows and oranges. So I prepared my palette. I'll lift this up and show it to you so you can see it. So on this palette is some titanium white. This is just yellow, basic red. These are primary colors, primary yellow, primary red. This is a hooker green. This is a primary blue. This is something called Payne's Gray, which is a version of, it's not black, but it has more blues in it like that I use a lot. So basically red and green and yellow and blue, a little bit of brown. This is burnt umber right here. And I do a little bit of the mixing here on this palette. I'm going to do most of this painting with a little 3/4 inch flat brush sort of thing, and we'll go from there. So that's what's going on there. As I mix colors, I'll try to show you what I'm doing. But to start with, I'm going to pick up some of this yellow down here and a little bit of, I want a little red in it because I'll play with that a bit. Get some of that, and then I'm just going to press that on here. Now you can see some of the texture that I designed into the model shows up during this process, which is important because it helps us with some of the details, especially later on when we do that. So just add a little bit in up here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of hooker green to put in here because I want some of and you can see I'm blending it. I'm doing a little bit of work down here on the palette, but I'm also blending it right on the fish. As you watch, you can see. You can see that taking shape. I'm adding some more yellow here. I'm going to grab some titanium white down in the bottom to soften all that. I don't tend to use pure white too often, but I use it to blend like this, and then in the end, we'll come back and play with it some more to make some highlights on the fish. So I'm over here with, I have my brushes in a cup of water. This paint dries in pretty quick. So in my classes I teach, if they leave the brush outside the water like this, in about 7 or 8 minutes, that brush is a frozen hard chunk of goo. So I'll use this water. And then once the water gets too tainted, throw it away, go get some clean your brush up. You'll see me a lot of using a cloth throughout this thing to clean off. I keep shop rags around when I'm painting so I can clean the brushes off and get them back to where they're started. But so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to go back in here and grab a little bit of burnt umber here and a touch of Payne's Gray, a little bit of that Hooker green, because I want it to be pretty dark. And I'm just kind of getting that color set down here. And then I'm going to get that nice dark background. I'm not worried if I paint up here, and I know those fins are going to be a different color later. I'm not worried about getting some paint up there right now. I can cover that up when I get there. I'm mostly wanting to get this dark area of this bass kind of set. So when you're painting, there's a lot of talk about values, and values is probably easier to teach when I'm teaching wood burning, because in wood burning, it's either completely burnt black as can be on a piece of wood, and the lightest thing you can do when you're wood burning is to not to burn anything. Well, values are the same with painting. You get a real strong dark color, and the variable that is how light. So some people you'll see when they paint this bass, they'll do it in a much lighter tones, and I get that. So when I'm working with this brush, if you smash the brush open, you can see it gets wide open like this. And as versus a flat brush where it's pulled together. But when I break it open like that, and for example, put some Payne's Gray on it, and this is called loading the brush. And that can create some detail without me putting individual spots in. So that's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to play with some of the detail up here in this bass. Now the hardest part of this is people they find out that they like doing this, and then they just don't stop, and they end up filling the whole bass in with some of this. So we'll go along the top up here and show the beginnings of this. And the brush gets unloaded as you go. You get less and less paint on it. Which is fine. You load it back up again and then get a little bit more paint on it and mush it out again and get it to where you want it. And then we'll put in there's vertical lines on the bass. A lot of fish have these where there's a pattern that's darker in some areas than in others. And there's a bit of a vertical line in the bass too. This is why it's important to have a reference as you go through this, so you can kind of come back and look at what appearance you want to have. So that's kind of the beginning of getting. Now, what I know, I'm going to switch to a much smaller brush right now, and I'll show you where I'm heading with that eventually. I'm going to take a little bit of my primary yellow and a little bit of white, titanium white, and just mix up. And what we know back, if you look at the reference picture as you go, that there's going to be spots where the scales really kind of show up. And we'll play with some of that a little bit later on. I just wanted to show that that will kind of occur. And it's the same with the darker scales and the lighter scales. So we'll take not just the scales, but there's on these patterns that show up. You can also see, and it helps if you're watching you'll see rows of darker scales show up and individual patterns of some scales. So take a look at the picture real carefully as you're doing this. Get a sense of it. Around the eye, with this being the eye right here, one of the things that shows up in the picture is some radial rows of dots that kind of radial out from the eye. So we'll put some of those in. The eye, we're going to come back and we'll paint it all eventually yellow, and then for right now, I'll put some white in to help you see it. And the same with some of those yellow highlights also show up. I go back and forth on these fish a lot when I'm doing what you'll get different parts of them that you sort of like where it's going. And so we're getting the basics laid in. I want to add some other colors to a few other parts. These fins down here are going to have some reds in them. This is just a little bit of, and just block this in quick. Don't get too carried away with some of you'll go nuts because I paint pretty fast, and part of the reason I can paint fast is because I don't mind fixing stuff later. And it's very rare that I get a piece done that I leave the way it is in the first pass. So I'll do these and then I'll come back later, and you'll see, like, even on this particular bass, I know what'll happen is I'll get them kind of close and sort of blocked in, and then what I'll do is I'll come back and spend some time to get more of the details to pop the way I want them to pop, and spend some time fixing that. So I don't get too concerned about, well, did it work, or did I like that, or you get little victories. You get a certain part of the painting, well, I kind of like how that looks, and then you leave that alone and you'll move on and find other parts of it that need some more attention. So what I suggest is you're going along here, if you see parts of it, if you're trying to follow along with this, is just pause this at certain spots and stop and go play around with certain, like these gill plates are all going to get popped back in some white. There's some white over here I don't want to have show up. And the other, um, so let's say I want more of that gold to show up. There's some of these fine detail uh, scales. It's okay to just paint them in white. And I'll tell you why is later on after this white dries, and will dry it a little bit. I don't want these to end up being that white is what you're seeing right here. But what's going to happen is later on we'll come back in after that white's completely dry. And then you see, it doesn't take long to get a few highlights of where some of these, so we'll come back in and we'll put a wash over those. A wash that has the, which is a thin, wet paint. And that'll kind of, we'll use that to change the color of that white. That makes sense, and you'll see that here in a little bit. So far we've kind of blocked in the bigger parts of this bass, the big black and yellow sections, and I'm adding in a little bit of detail for scales and some color with a smaller brush. I'm gonna, as I kind of go along, I'm gonna define where some of these shadows and stuff are on the face. This is called finger painting right here. I'm just smoothing that out. I want a little bit of shadow underneath his gill plates. And that just helps separates them. Tells us that they're not, that they're a little different level than the rest of this guy. So this is my preference for when I'm doing smaller detail is to use, not sure if I can get that to focus, but it's a flat brush, but it's only about 1/8 of an inch wide. It's pretty stiff, pretty firm. And it allows me to, I can turn it sideways and get turn it sideways and get nice straight lines with it. It makes better straight edges than, say, for example, I might get if I was using just a fine hair. This is part where it helps to have good reference pictures, something that it's just a matter of going back and finding where there's parts and pieces that you like and that are working. I am adding a little hooker's green up across the top here to kind of soften that a little bit. The camera shows that as being very blue right now, but it's that's not the color I'm getting here in person. And that's just the nature of photography. What goes on there. So I'm going to add a little color on the end backside of those fins. I don't know, as a kid, I remember my brothers and I catching bass and arguing about what were different species and stuff, because a lot of times they'd show up and there'd be different colors. And well, where did that come from? That was not he wasn't, we have mostly we caught a lot of smallmouth bass, but they were often not the same color variations. I don't know if it had to do with what they were eating or what. It was pretty. Noticeable. So this is the basic blocking of what goes in when I'm doing these. Add some dark colors back here where the fin has some textures. And add some and then add some definition here on the back side of these fins as well. Same on the tail. Just some quick strokes there to. So what we basically accomplished right now is kind of blocked in for the most part, the color, where the colors are going to lie on this bass. So now from here on out, it's all a matter of going in and playing with details. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time tinkering with this, and I encourage you to do the same thing when you try these. Let me pull the detail, my reference picture back over here and show you some of the things that I'm going to continue working on. But when you look at just how the scales show up here in rows and they're actually individual dots, it's difficult to see that but you can see enough of it to tell. There's also rows of stripes down here at the bottom of different color softnesses. And so I'm going to work on that. I'm going to play with some bluegills a little bit for a while. I'm going to let the camera run while I do some of that. I'll just go back and forth. And again, what I'd encourage you to do is take some time and get some paints out on your on your carvings and go ahead and start painting some carvings because it's they're just you can do it too. And it adds a lot to some of them. If you might have to, I've no doubt ruined a few. I'm sure you will too. But have some fun doing it. And I think Leonardo da Vinci said that you never finish a painting, you just abandon it. So there's some truth to that. So, but I think what you'll find is with acrylics, part of the beauty of acrylics is that you can fix stuff. You give it a couple minutes and dry it, bring your hair dryer over and blow it dry. And then this is the third attempt that I made today at painting this bass. I had some colors go wrong, so I just hair dried it quick, painted it over with white, and came back at it again. So just takes a few minutes to do that. And if it's not headed in the direction that you want it to go, just do that. And it's a good thing to learn because it's it's you won't risk doing a great job if you quit, if you just settle for an okay job. So you have to be willing to push it a bit further, and that means you better know how to fix stuff. I know with the CNC, I've learned over the years how to fix an awful lot of my mistakes. And I learned a lot of that from some of you guys, that it just is a matter of a fact that you're going to put a lot of time into a piece and then make a mistake on it and go, what can I do to get that fixed? And you're going to call up one of your buddies and figure out how to do a fix. So do the same thing with painting. You put some colors on, you don't like them, and you go back and learn how to take them off and put them back on another way. So, well, let's take a minute, let that dry on there for a few seconds. I'm going to change over here to my bluegill picture. And let me see, where's the bluegill picture? There he is up there. And I think maybe I'll move the camera a little closer, not a lot closer. And see if we can do a couple bluegills quick. So we'll get some yellow on these guys with a small amount of, we'll do two of these guys right here. You can see I kind of started them already in the paints. There's some paint already on them. Get them a little more yellow in the middle. Now, yellow is not a strong, powerful color, so sometimes it might need some white like that to make it pop more. And I see from up here in the photo that I'm looking at that the yellows go out well into the face, in the lower part of the face, and then there's some white back here in the belly. So I'm going to same thing across the top of their back. There's a dark, rich sort of green. We'll add some of that in, darken this all up on these little fellas. I'll show you at the very end of this. I'll pull the carving off the board and show you what I did on the edges, because as you guys all know, CNCs are not. I do sell these files as two-sided files, but for the most part, they're not two-sided. So the CNC will only paint one or carve one side of a piece. So you end up with these edges under here that are not carved and they're flat. So it's fine from the angle you're looking at. You go, well, okay, that's kind of a little blue down here. Use blue on these fins here. Kind of like that. And make those darker. With some of my Payne's gray. I'm going to make this one kind of a blue fin down here as well. With some Payne's gray to make it dark. Appreciate you guys. Anybody that's made it this far in the video, I appreciate any guidance and help you want to offer on how to make these things better and more useful. I do like carving, and it's nice to share some of this stuff. And, there's some very pretty bright colored reds on what I call the throat area of these. Put that in there. This guy up here is going to have some too. We're not painting him right now. So these little tiny miniature fish also have some of the same vertical lines that the bass have. Plop in some of those. I know that I'm going to paint around the eye with some darker colors because we're going to put, that's where we're going to get that in there. So let's see. The wall looks up here. It's starting to look a little bit like some little bluegills. We'll put a right spot where the eye is going to go. Now we'll a secret weapon for cleaning that up here in a little bit, but we won't deal with that right now. A bit of light showing up on here. There's a little bit of sparkle on these fish. Kind of tells you where the water is coming in from, or where the sunlight's coming in from. Generally, there'll be a little bit of sunlight twinkling on their backs, and when you same with like these logs, there'll be some sunlight just kind of popping in here, making the light hit, and some of that also hits the fish. And you'll see some of that, and I just add it in, and if I don't like it, I take it back out, but you'll. This fish is down here in the shadows a bit, so he's going to be kind of below, but I'm trying to turn that bass a little bit towards you so you can see better what the light looks like on that. But you can see here that there's the big flat sides of these. Now, when I do these pieces, I tend to just take rattle can paint and paint the edges of them black. And I'll tell you why, is in part because like if you look at that tail, all I want the client to see is that thin part of the tail when he looks at it, what he's seeing from right here. So the rest of that I'll just kind of cover in black. The other thing you can do, and I commonly do this, but that's a harder lesson to learn is I do carve the back side of these a lot of times, and I'll take my other carving tools after it comes off the CNC machine, and I'll carve the back side of in behind these fish so that they're so they are a little bit more three-dimensional, so they sit on the wall a bit better. But I also design them because I want them to be a design needs to be a wall piece. They're not. I'm not trying to sell it as a reproduction or a taxidermy piece or something. It's meant to be a wall, kind of a wall piece. So that's kind of, I think I'm probably going to stop right there. That gives you the basics of this. Some of this white back here at this point, by taking yellow over top of that, you can change those white spots and push those back in. I'll load the brush up with a very small amount of blue and add some shadow on the bottom of the piece. And I'll tell you what, I do that when I'm painting fish and they're round. You can see there's a big fish painting I'm working on in the background right now. And it's important to have, you can see the bottom of those fish, and it's a little bit out of focus back there, but the bottom of those fish has shadows painted on them because there's no 3D there at all. You have to create it with shadows. Well, it doesn't hurt to use shadowing on your carvings in the same way to add what you can to it. So little bit of Payne's gray or blue to add in some darkness and shadows on the bottom, because that's what would actually exist down there. That's a little too dark. And it adds to the shape of the fish. And some shadows under where there would be gills and stuff. It'll lift them out a bit. So just dabbing some Payne's gray up here just to soften some of what I got going on up top. And so there you go. That's the basics of what I would do on a fish. The hardest part for me and it is for you is to walk away from these things. I can keep tinkering and this fish will stay out here for a day or two. I'll move him over to my easel and I'll finish him up over there and finish the rest of the details on these bluegills. Uh, Probably maybe after dinner. But thanks for watching. And if you got questions, as always, please give me a ring. Drop us a note at Scott Art. Let's see, where's that at? There you go. There you go. You can drop us a note there at Scott Art CNC on Etsy. And happy to help you through projects. So thanks for stopping in. Talk to you later.